he wrote the check on the arm of the chair. And I wish I still had the check because it was like falling off and all this other thing. And he wrote it and gave us the check. And, we were a little suspicious, so we checked it and it cleared. Guy drops 25 grand and then it just disappears.
In today's episode of the Defying Odds podcast, you're about to listen to a conversation I had with Michael Matus. He's a local business owner here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he's ran and operated a marketing company for the past 25 years that now has 27 employees. We talk about how he got into the business, what allowed him to continue to grow and scale over the past 25 years, and some of the craziest stories that he's ever dealt with. Thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate, first off, us meeting and you taking the time to come onto the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with a little introduction, and not just business, because obviously we're going to talk about that a lot, your experience at Tower, but yeah, a little introduction into you, who you are, what you do for work.
How far do you want to go back? It's funny. I feel like I've told these stories a bunch of times. And some of the people who watch this later are going to be like, oh, that story again. We will get into Tower, but I think some of the things that are kind of, I guess, interesting is where the seeds kind of started right from the get-go. When I was little, I was always drawing. And, for those who know me, I was actually a designer, kind of coming out of school. But I wasn't like predestined for that. I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to draw cartoons in the worst way. And my mom basically said to me, she goes, you're not going to make a living at that, in the papers, the newspapers. And she goes, I'll go up to New York, when you're 30 and you'll be on the sidewalk drawing chalk drawings, on the side.
Yeah.
And she's like, that's how you're going to make your living. You're going to have a little hat there and people will be pitching coins in there. But, kind of, fast forwarding a little bit, I was going to be an architect, and there's things called weed out classes in college, that I didn't even know what they were. I mean, nobody really sets you up for those things. It's just like you go into a classroom and there's 20 seats and there's 40 kids in the class. You're like, how is this going to work? And then I was like, like the next class, it was down to 30. And then the next class, it was down to 20. And I was just like, okay. So then you start asking around. You're like, how does this work? And they're like, yeah, it's a weed out class. And so I was like, crap. And it was a calculus class. And my calculus teacher was tough. She was really hard to understand. And she wanted to focus on a few people. And she's like, yeah, you're not going to make this. So I had to drop it. Basically, I couldn't be an architect anymore. So I had to find something else. And that same semester, it came through that I was going to be a graphic designer. And the graphic design class was just like eye-opening for me. But I didn't find out until I found out that class was also a weed out class. And the professor just, they isolate people. They're like, that person's not going to make it, that person. And then they make sure that they kick them out. And we were about 3 projects in. And I used this speech at my 25th anniversary that we just had. And I told everybody, I'm going to spit this story out for those people who are, Tower people. Just kind of fast forward to this section. But the class was, or the project was postage stamps. And everybody got a theme. You had to pick a theme out of a hat. And everybody was getting these awesome themes like Olympics and like famous landmarks. And I got buildings, just cubes.
Yeah. And
the thing is, it had to be a series of 4 stamps. And they had to be spring, summer, fall, winter. And the buildings was kind of like the thing that you had to put in there. So I'm like, so what am I going to do? Put a building with snow on it, a building in leaves, I was really baffled.
Yeah.
So I kind of leaned into my cartoonist thing a little bit. And I also had figure drawing at the class at the same time. So I was going to weave all this together. So I'm like, I'm going to show her because she's giving me a rough time. And we'd have these critiques and they were like bloodbaths. And I'm like, I'm going to think outside the box and I'm going to wow her. So I came up with this character. His name was Bill Ding. And he was a guy who so I put building, gave him arms and a legs. He was just a cube. He had no face, but I gave him skis for winter. I had him like playing in leaves for fall. Spring was a kite, and summer he was surfing. So I thought this was brilliant.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. I'm like, nobody is going to think that far. So I went up there and I put it up there. Went up there, told them my concept. I'm like, this is building. And she hated it.
Really?
She failed me on the spot.
What?
She goes, you did not follow the directions. I wanted you to put a picture of like the United Nations building and put a red background. I'm like, that's so boring.
Yeah.
And I basically failed that class. And but the thing that came out of that was like, I'm like, damn it, I'm gonna be a designer because that's what I needed to be. And I found out too late. So it all kind of worked out.
Yeah.
You know, that teacher was not the nicest one to me, but got all the way through it. And you know, dreams happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So became a designer. You know, ultimately, when I came out of school, the internet was huge. And, you know, you could get a job anywhere because they're like, you know, oh, you can build websites. You know, these things are called websites. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm dating myself, but they're like, come on right in. And that's what kind of fueled everything. You know, that actually spawned Tower because I was doing work, you know, at my regular job. And then I'd run home, work another 8 hours at night building websites over and over and over and over and over again. So I had two. This is segueing right into Tower. So if you want to ask another question, we can. But
no, the next question is how do you get into business? So you're on track.
Yeah, well, good. Hey, it's like I studied for this.
Yeah.
So I had two partners. They actually formed the company first. I actually came in later. One was kind of like an IT guy. The other one was a developer. And I was a designer. So it kind of worked great. We had like the trifecta.
Yeah.
We could pretty much do everything. And like I said, we were just doing stuff hand over fist because everybody wanted a website. Back then, nobody had them. And they're like, where do I get one? And, you know, there were no website builders like Wix. And we were still building everything from scratch. So it's really where it kind of came to a head. And I would say by about 2003, we kind of went full time on it. We just kind of ditched our jobs, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
We gave ourselves a date. We're like January 1, you know, we're all going to switch over and just kind of go headlong into this thing. And that's what we did. And we were still, I mean, economy was still good. And we didn't have that recession until about 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
But we were small enough to kind of get through that. So yeah, that's kind of where it started.
At what point in that process did you make the decision that you actually wanted to be a partner, not just work for them as a designer?
You know, it's funny because a lot of people ask me that, and it's I don't think it was ever like a second thought for me.
Yeah.
It was always no, that's what I'm going to do. Because at my previous job, I was like the coordinator and the account executive and the business dev person. I mean, we were doing it all anyway.
Yeah.
It's just like, why should we do it for somebody else? So my wife in 2003 told me, she's like, if we're going to do it now. Because if it takes off, fantastic. But if it fails, you know, we don't have any kids. We don't have a house. So we're like, boom. So it was never even a second thought.
Yeah.
It's still to this day. It's like, nope, this is never going to fail. We're doing this because that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you build Tower over the years, and when did you become, are you 100% owner now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that happen?
So my other two partners got great jobs. One at the time, I think, was working at the Morning Call in Allentown. The other got like head of IT at Kutztown University. So, you know, again, it was still kind of the Wild West, and everybody was, you know, getting these great jobs. And but I was like, no, Tower's in my blood. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it was really hard. Screwed up a lot. You know, they always say 2 steps forward, 1 step. Absolutely, it is. You just have to fail to learn, and I did that over and over and over.
Yeah.
But you keep falling forward, and that's really where it kind of came from. And a lot of it is common sense. If you don't have common sense, you're not going to survive no matter what.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, I figured out I have to surround myself with good people that I can trust and lean on, and basically, give them segments of the business to kind of keep expanding. I don't think I learned that lesson until, let's say, 2016, 2017. I mean, I got some really good people, the best team I've probably ever had. It's just diverse, talented, driven, good people, fun people. And you just can't buy that. I mean, the team that we have is everything. It's who you are. And the other thing that I think that the key to our success was just transparency, is just telling people, it's like, look, this is how it is, right or wrong. But, that way I don't have to go home and, I can put my head in the pillow and I sleep fine.
Yeah.
So now when we have, and, we've had really good success, for a number of years now. And I think we're just fortunate to, be in that position. So
how early on did you become the sole owner?
About 2006.
Okay. So very early on.
Yeah.
A few years in.
Yeah. So it's about 15, 16 years now.
Yeah. And then since you became sole owner, what were, you answered this question for me when we first met. What was the biggest factor in becoming, creating Tower to what it is today?
What's the biggest factor? Gosh, I hope I remember to answer it the same way. Because if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably answer it differently.
Yeah. I mean, you said patience just took time.
It did.
That really stuck with me because you're like, we've been doing it for 25 years.
Yeah. And it's funny because once you get to a certain point, you'll look back and you'll be like, holy shit, we've been doing this for how long?
Yeah.
And then you really start thinking like, okay, there were moments that, transform the company.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that you learn and just kind of keep taking, like I said, falling forward.
Yeah. Over those past 25 years, what have been your biggest challenges? And this doesn't need to be just in Tower, but in your life in general with growing a successful company.
Boy, that's deep.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges? Growth. Growth is the biggest challenge because, look, I don't have a degree in running a business or accounting or any of those things, which is when you can't do those things, you gotta find people that can.
Yeah.
Or you figure it out. And I'm just one of those people that I just love to figure things out. And things make a lot of sense. And, when you're putting a puzzle together, you start with the edge and you start filling in. And that's really, what I try to keep doing. So, yeah, I wouldn't say there's like one thing. There's probably lots of keys. Yeah. 25 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And it's been a blink. They always say the older you get, the faster time goes. It's absolutely true. I remember we had a 20th anniversary party. It felt like it was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
It was 5 years ago. That's pre-pandemic, which is, also kind of a lifetime ago.
Yeah. Do you have any horror stories throughout the last 25 years of growing it?
There are some that I can't even share here, but I mean, we had a company one time. They approached us, and they were the owner of the company was working in Washington, and we met him at a restaurant, which was like halfway between here and there. It's just the way we kind of worked it out. But he wanted all this stuff. It was like a software scanning company. And this was, I want to say this is like 2010, 2011. And this was right after, well, it's still kind of, the Iraq war was still a thing. And, terrorism was a big thing. And we were still worried about like bombs being smuggled into the country through the cargo containers. Well, this guy had a company that would scan the cargo containers and do software and all those kinds of things. He worked for the Pentagon. He had security clearance that was through the roof. And so we met him at a restaurant. he's like, yeah, I need all this stuff. I need a logo. I need a brochure. I need a website. Went right down the line. We're like, I couldn't even write fast enough. He wanted all this stuff. And so he said, what do you think it's going to cost? I'm like, he goes, I'll write you a check for $20,000. I'm like, look, I don't really know what that's going to, he's like, okay, $25,000. I'm like, all right. So he wrote the check. He wrote the check on the arm of the chair. And I wish I still had the check because it was like falling off and all this other thing. And he wrote it and gave us the check. And, you know, we were a little suspicious. So we checked it and it cleared. So we went back. We did all this work. To this day, I still have all this work sitting in a package because the guy disappeared. No email, wouldn't return calls. He had a cell phone. He gave me a cell number, everything. And one day I called his cell number. It was disconnected. We kind of looked him up online to see if we could find his address, to see if we could get, you know, in contact with his wife. I mean, we were a little worried because we were paid for work that he never received. So we were going to, you know, give him whatever we had. And there was nothing. Guy vanished. To this day, I still don't know what happened to him. And like I said, he was involved in the Pentagon. He wasn't an old guy.
Yeah.
I would say he was in his, you know, late 40s, but he seemed in good shape. We were checking the obituaries, for crying out loud. Just disappeared, gone. So to this day, like, okay, cool. So there it was.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of that happening.
Yeah. Guy drops 25 grand and then just disappears.
Huh.
So I don't know. So he would go overseas sometimes because the software needed to be good in other countries. And, you know, you make up your own stories about what happened. And maybe he just went overseas and just never came back.
Yeah.
So I don't know. To this day, just missing.
Huh.
MIA.
So with Tower, I guess this could be with your life too, because obviously entrepreneurship consumes your life. And this is not necessarily a talk just about Tower, but it's talk about you. Like, what's been your greatest accomplishment over the past few years?
You know, it's kind of funny because the business on its own was always like, I was a driver. And then at a certain point, I kind of mentioned about the whole thing about finding good people. Mm-hmm. It started taking a life of its own because certain people started taking pieces off and started making just things easier for me. So now I can kind of look at the business as a whole. And, you know, we do these things in, you know, internally, they're called strengths finders. Basically, they isolate what you're good at and what you're not good at. And everybody's got different ones. I think there's factors of 30. So I think my top two are like strategic and futuristic, which I'm like, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because those are the two things I really need to kind of run this company.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my headspace is now, is just making sure we are on the forefront of everything. But I mean, my fingerprints are on still everything. I like being in the trenches with everybody. It just, I just like feeling like I'm rowing with the rest of the team rather than being in some, you know, glass cubicle and, you know, just saying, hey, come in my office. And, you know, I'm not like that.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather people see what I'm doing and I want to see what they're doing. And you kind of just, it's just, you're more connected, I think is what it is.
Yeah. And from going to your space a few times, first off, I love the space. It's awesome. Yeah, it's what I dream of having. Yeah. And the team and everything is just super cool atmosphere. But I also noticed that your desk is with everybody else's.
Yeah. It's right in the middle.
You're not separated. I love it.
And my desk isn't any bigger than anybody else's. Yeah. And I did that for a reason. Now, I will say, there's only 2 windows in like the work area, so I do have one of the windows. So I did get to pick my my space. So, you know, there was a little perk there, but for the most part, you know, just one of the gang.
Yeah. Over the years and building that team of people who can make your job easier, so you can focus on the business. What did you look for in hires?
So, there's a great meme that says we hire on attitude, we can teach skills. And I think that's so true. You can tell when people are driven, and it's not like the resume will tell us the things that they know. If it's a developer, it's like, okay, we do PHP. Okay, great. But I want to know, how good are you at working with other people? We have 3 core values, and this is not a tower video by any means, but we hire on it. I want to know that you're passionate. I want to know that you're curious, and I want to know that you're selfless, because passionate people love what they do and will be around forever. Curious people will constantly reinvigorate their skills, and selfless people will be great to work with. And that's really what we kind of look for. So we're interviewing the person. I can see what you do on a resume. I can see what you've done. But we weren't always like that. We were looking at their resume and they're like, oh, okay, well, they can do this and they can do that. Certain skills can be taught, but if you're a good teammate, you're a good leader, that's tough to find. And, so.
So take me into Tower a little bit of like the specifics of what you guys do.
So, as a designer, we kind of came out of the chute. Websites. It was websites all the time. And the internet marketing was always kind of there, but it was never at the forefront. And I think that becomes, you only learn how to be in business the longer you're in it, because you know how you want to sell it only over time. It would be so easy. It's just like, okay, great. I want to sell a website, or, but knowing how long those things take and what the pitfalls are and questions to ask, it's, it only comes over time. But, really for us now, we do branding, we do websites, and we do internet marketing. A lot of people have websites now. They're not great, so you have to redo them. But the internet marketing is, truly where our business is, just keeps growing in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
But we do a lot of branding now. I think people are starting to really see the value in it. Not that they didn't before, but even smaller businesses are like, well, we just want to start good right off the bat, rather than kind of growing into things. And, that's encouraging to see. But when you kind of take all that and kind of wrap that together, that's where, magic really happens for us. And for the client too, because when you can kind of control all those pieces, when it looks great, you have a website at the core of your marketing, and then you kind of wrap these things around with all these initiatives that are sending people into the website. That's the cool part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this question's for me, because you already helped me a little bit with it, but when you were growing, how did you basically verify your value and set pricing according? When we first met, we were talking about pricing for my video services, because we're still talking about working together. And you gave me a bunch of pointers, and pricing is something that I feel like I always am undercharging, but at the same time, I always feel like I'm also overcharging. So how did you get over that when growing?
So, at first, you kind of have your idea of what an hourly rate should be. And then you kind of say, okay, I can do that in 6 hours, or I can do that in 50 hours if it's a bigger project. And that's kind of where you start. And then over time, you start developing spreadsheets, and then, but the great thing with like having a spreadsheet or a system is that you start to become systematic with your pricing, but it also kind of brings other factors in, like accounting or project management or coordination as your team kind of gets bigger. So you have to account for all those hours. So then your prices go up. But I think the thing is when you kind of throw a dart and you say, look, I'll just use a video. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to know what necessarily the price of this thing. Well, let's just say it's $15,000 for a video. If you can have the justification in the back of your mind as to how you came up with that, because it's 72 hours and it's at this price. So if somebody calls you on it, at least you can say, well, here's my spreadsheet. You're not going to do that, but you can say, this is my justification for it. Then you're okay. But if you kind of just throw darts at it, that's when you start to get into trouble. So look, and I will say we kind of stepped into, I would say we had pricing issues probably midway where we just weren't charging enough.
Yeah.
And we had like a boatload of clients that we were, that were on retainer. And I'm like, I need to, and then what we did is for about a month, we just sat down and we crafted what it should be, what it is, what it isn't, what we will do, like change our terms and conditions, all this stuff. But it got us thinking on how we should price it. And I'm like, oh my God, it's 4 or 5 times higher than it is right now. I got to go back to all those clients and say, I can't charge you that anymore. I'm losing money on it. And I did, and I lost all of them but one.
Really?
So, but here's the thing. The idea of what we wanted to sell and how we wanted to sell it was so ingrained in our brains. We went out, we started spewing it to everybody, and we started convincing people because we were so knowledgeable about it. And suddenly, we got like 3 or 4 clients at 4 or 5 times the cost that we were charging before.
Yeah.
And now we're like, now we got something. And that's where things pretty much changed for us as a business.
Yeah.
That's where our growth just went boom.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, we had all this more revenue, which allowed us to go out and get more people.
Yeah.
And just, that's what it's always ebbing and flowing.
Yeah.
Is I need revenue to get people, and then I need people to get revenue. It just keeps kind of going back and forth.
Yeah. Cash flow is definitely the fuel for business.
Sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you need to, and honestly, you need to know where your cash is coming from at all times. I kind of mentioned that I sit in the studio with everybody else, but all the accounting and operations, I'm still heavily involved in that because I need to know from a 30,000 foot perspective where all that is coming from.
Yeah.
So, and then when you get to a point, like I said, I think it was about 2017, it starts having a life of its own, and it starts generating things on its own, which is the exciting part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the future of Tower and the future of you?
Future of Tower. Sometimes people ask me that, and I'm like, we're going to keep doing what we're doing because it ain't broke.
Yeah.
Don't fix it. And I kind of mentioned curiosity as one of our core values. We're always needing to keep ahead of those things. So when new things social media come up, or even pay-per-click for a certain extent, we could have a whole conversation on the history of PPC and what it looked like and all those kinds of things. But our clients expect us to be ahead of that curve. And that's where we're going to continue to be, viable in the future. We're still growing. The funny thing is the pandemic, kind of showed us that we can be more remote. We only have 21 spots in our studio. Well, now we have 27 employees. Yeah. So we're just kind of we've kind of busted through the barrier of what we were able to hold. And the pandemic didn't have too many good points to it, but the one thing it did do for us is show us that we can be more hybrid, and all our people are hybrid now. The cool thing is the way our spaces are laid out is we have some people coming and going. It's almost like a common workspace kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some people who are there every day, get to keep their spaces, but that's really where that goes. The future for me, I wrote a book in college. It was like a fantasy fiction kind of thing, Lord of the Rings-esque, and it came out of a history lesson that I heard in college. The professor actually said, she goes, "This would make a great book." Now, the whole thing is totally changed whatever that history lesson was, but I think, once I kind of get to retirement, I'll probably jump back into that. I rewrote the whole thing. Now there's 3 books, but I want to work with a writer, and I want to work with a character designer, and start building that out and build like a kick-ass website that kind of promotes it and do social. And that's probably what I'll do. That's my passion. So
awesome.
Yeah.
with the change of technology over the years, because you've been in business for 25 years, obviously there's been a big change. How were you making sure that you were staying on top of all those things? Like, is there a process that you do consistently where you're like, okay, here's this new platform. Do we need to consider this for our clients?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. It's listen to your team, because the people who are doing the work are the ground troops, and they'll know way before you will. And having the willingness to listen, and it gets harder the older the company gets and the bigger it is, because, at a certain point, it's like, turning an aircraft carrier around. It's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
But when you're small and nimble, do it. If somebody says this is because, look, ages ago, we had our own content management tool for websites. We had our own newsletter tool. We had 5 tools that we were that we built and that we were utilizing into websites. And then this little thing called WordPress came about. And look, honestly, Mike went kicking and screaming on that. I'm like, we just put all this money into all this, and now we're doing that. And they're like, this is the way we got to do it. And, probably took about 2 weeks, and I was just like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
And we did. And I'm thankful we did, because otherwise, once you become a dinosaur, you go extinct. That's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, another reason that I sit out there is just listen to your people, because they're the ones doing it. And when you have 27 pairs of eyes looking at things all over the internet that deal with what you do, they're going to see it first.
Yeah.
It's just like anything. Your cameras, your lighting, all this stuff. It's going to be outdated in 2 years. So what's the next best thing? Well, hopefully in 2 years, you're not doing this anymore. You're like, going out and getting business, or, just something higher up, and you got a fleet of guys in here doing editing and all those kinds of things. They'll tell you what you should buy.
Yeah.
And listen. That's all I would say, is just listen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And my final question is definitely for me. What's advice from you for me owning a video production company? I've been in business for 4 or 5 years. Just any piece of advice.
Advice. Follow your instinct. If it makes sense to you in here, it probably makes sense to somebody else who will hire you. And I mean, I've said it many, many times, even as it's just like, gotta trust my instinct on this. My instinct's telling me this. I mean, sometimes it's wrong, but for the most part, it's not. Especially with business, which is, like I said, a little bit more common sensey. I can use that as a word. Yeah. If you would do it for yourself, then a client will be like, yep, that makes sense to me too.
Yeah.
Not only that, but people love when you learn lessons, because then you'll go out and you'll tell those lessons to other people, and they'll be like, yeah, totally get it. We went through that. So just staying true to yourself, listen to that intuition, keep pushing through. Don't get lazy. Some businesses do just get lazy with it, and they're like, it's all it is. It's all it's going to ever be. Always expect more of yourself. I mean, one of our art director said, we were talking today, and he's like, if you ever think that you're a good designer, probably not. Which I thought it was just like, yeah, don't ever be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
It's just the same thing with being a good businessman. If you think you're a good businessman, probably not.
Yeah.
Probably some room for improvement. There's always room for improvement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you guys so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it, if you got any sort of value out of it, please take a few seconds of your time to like this video if you're on YouTube, or give us a 5-star review if you're on Spotify or on Apple. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.